In this brainstorming drill, we're gonna work with a pretty typical metric in a lot of cases, utilization rates. And we're gonna do so for a public sector problem, but it's really, you shouldn't call it a public sector problem. I don't know why I called it. It's just a service that people use. So it could be a private sector as well, but it could be public sector too. So how to increase public bikes utilization rates? Let's jump into the case question. So consider the following context. You're doing a case, and the case is about a certain city that has bicycles as part of their public transport system. So in this city, citizens can, for a small fee, get bicycles in one of hundreds of pickup stations and then drop them off in any other station. So kind of a shared service for bicycles. People can use those along with buses, with the metro or the subway system, and so on. And there's no private competitor, so these are the only shared bikes in the city. Now you're doing this case, you know it's about optimizing this system, and in the middle of the case the interviewer comes to you with this question: what are things that the city could do to increase the utilization rates of these bikes? So one way to make the system more efficient, work better, is to increase the utilization rates. So what can a city do to increase utilization rates of its shared bicycles? Now, time for you to pause this video and create your own, generate your own ideas, your own hypothesis for what can the city do in a structured, preferably prioritized way. Now let's see my answer. So I'm gonna define utilization rates as the number of hours per day that the average bike is in use. Of course, the maximum is 24 hours. So if these bikes are in use for 10 hours nowadays, how can we increase that to 11 to 12 hours per day? And of course, we could do that by reducing the number of bicycles or increasing the usage, but just taking bicycles off the system might not be beneficial, as we're gonna see. So I'm gonna structure this in a different way. I'm gonna try to increase usage by increasing perceived value or by reducing hassle or friction. So these are my two buckets. Now, one thing that I didn't explore here is a third bucket that could be how to put these bikes in places that make more sense. So maybe a few stations are not being used at all, or are not being used a lot. And honestly, I already built this case, so I kind of missed that bucket, and I'm just thinking of it now as I speak. But let's move on with these two buckets, because these are the two that I thought of as I thought of this case. Just there's a third bucket, I guess, and I guess I didn't fully think of it. But let's see how I do with these two buckets. So to increase perceived value, we can increase actual value, or we can improve perception. To increase actual value, we can improve the bicycles, either the equipment or the maintenance. So we can change these bicycles to better bicycles with more gears, more comfortable ones, faster ones, or do more maintenance more frequently, or do better maintenance. Maybe no one's using them because they're broken down all the time, or because they don't trust the braking systems. Now, another way to increase actual value is to have better or more parking stations. By having better parking stations, I mean parking stations in places that are better lit, or they're more convenient, or maybe just aesthetics. Maybe they just look better and people use them more. Or we have more parking stations, so they are always closer to the origin and the destination of these people. And also a third way to do it is to have better or more roads or lanes. So of course, these people who are riding bikes, they have to ride them somewhere. They could ride on the streets, but much better to ride them all on biking roads or biking lanes. And maybe these are not very good, maybe they have holes in it, so they could be improved, or they're not very well signaled, or they're not well separated from car traffic, or maybe there's just not enough of them and you can't get many places using this system. You have to use the regular streets, and most people won't feel comfortable doing that. Or to increase perceived value, we can also improve perception, and we can advertise the benefits of using bikes, maybe the health benefits, or maybe it's faster to move through the city using bikes, or maybe it's cheaper to use these bikes than to use your own bikes. Or we can improve the PR, so maybe the media is not talking well about this system, and we can talk to them and show them the benefits so that the media talks good things about the system and shows the population how to use it. And maybe you have celebrities using it, and I don't know, posting on Instagram, things like that. But these are ways to improve perception without increasing actual value, which also works to improve perceived value. Now, the second bucket is to reduce friction, and there's 3 sources of friction in my opinion. The first one is sign-up friction, so you have to sign up for the service in some way. Or maybe you don't have to sign up for the service, in which case there's no sign-up friction. Second one is the bike pickup interfaces. So there's some friction to pick up the bike. So from the moment you say, I want to get a bike, to the moment you get the bike, there might be some friction, and we can take that off. And the third one is the walking distances. So from where I am right now to where the bike is, how far is it? And this could be a driving distance or riding the bus distance as well, but probably walking distance. So let's start with signing up friction. There's 3 of them. The first one is it online or offline? So the way I imagine it is you have an app that you download and you sign up. But because it's a public service, I can imagine that maybe you have to go somewhere and fill out some forms. I don't know how it is. So if it's online, there's less friction. The second one is, what are the sign-up steps? So maybe it's online, but you have to do all these things and fill out all these forms and put your tax information, your citizen information. I don't know. The less steps, the better. And the simpler the steps, the better. And finally, what are the sign-up problems that happen when people try to sign up? We don't want a lot of problems. We want as few as possible. If possible, no problems. Because people who find these problems probably don't become users. Now, once people have signed up, they need to pick up the bikes. One way to make this better is to simplify the bike pickup process. So I don't know exactly how the process is, but I imagine the bike in a station and it's locked up somehow, and you have to do a series of steps to get the bike and then to deliver it. And the more we simplify this, the better. Another way to improve the bike pickup interfaces is to reduce the stuff needed. So I'm guessing that when you get to a bike station, you need something to prove that you're a user or that you're paying. So maybe a smartphone app, maybe some cards, maybe your citizen ID, and perhaps you can reduce that or optionally reduce that with fingerprints. Or I don't know, the less stuff we need, the more easily the citizens can pick up these bikes. And the third one is to reduce errors. So maybe when people go get the bikes, there are errors that prevent them from picking up the bikes, and this not only makes them not pick the bike in that one occasion, but also it makes them not trust the system, so they'll figure out some other way to move around. But if the system's error free, then people can really trust it and use it whenever they want. And the third one is to reduce walking distances. And here it's similar to the increasing value thing with more stations. By having more parking stations, you reduce the walking distances, and this not only increases value but also reduces the friction. So maybe some people are lazy to walk too far to get a bike. And if you have a bike, a block away from home, why not use it? But then there's also a question of putting stations in strategic locations. So what I mean by this is, I don't know if we have stations near subway or metro exits, or near important bus lines, or near important places in the city, but if we don't, we need to have them there, because those are the places where most people need transport. Now, in the beginning of the case, I mentioned that there is a third bucket, which I hadn't thought of when I was building these slides, which is having the bicycles well distributed, because one way to increase utilization rates is to have more people using these bikes, so increasing perceived value, reducing friction. But also another way is to having the bikes better distributed, because if there's some bikes in some place of town that no one's using them, then it doesn't make sense. If I were to explore that bucket, and I am exploring it now, there's two things within it. The first one is closing down unused stations. Unless we can boost the usage of these stations, we need to close them down, because these are just bikes that are not being used anyway. And the second one is I'm guessing that some routes are more used in some times of the day. So for example, if there's a residential area and a commercial area, then there's bikes moving from the residential area to the commercial area in the morning, and from the commercial area to the residential area on the afternoon. So maybe we can have some vehicles that take the bikes from the commercial area to the residential area in the morning, so people can use it more. And then, so they basically rearrange the bikes to where the demand is during a certain time of the day. I've seen that happening in some cities, and this is one way to distribute the bikes better. Now, I don't know if it makes sense to do that, because maybe having the truck doing that is more expensive from a fixed cost standpoint than having more bikes, and we need to do a cost benefit analysis to do that. Now, a couple of things that I want to talk about to debrief this brainstorming question. Well, one of them is unexpected, which is, what if I forget something while I'm brainstorming? In this case, honestly, it was unintentional. I forgot a whole bucket of redistributing these bikes to the places with high demand and taking them out with places of low demand. And what do you do in a brainstorming question if you forget a whole bucket? In this case, I could have just remade the slides and pretended that I didn't forget it, but I prefer to do it more naturally and to show you that I'm human too. I make mistakes, and you can too in your case interviews, and there's no problem with that. So how do you recover from a mistake? If you forget a whole category and you notice it throughout the case as you answer your interview, what should you do? Well, pretty simple. Whenever you figure out that you've forgotten a whole bucket, you tell the interviewer, as I did tell you, well, I just noticed that I forgot a whole bucket here, which is this, and I'll go back to that in the end. And then you explain to the interviewer everything you thought, and then at the end, you go back to that bucket you forgot and you try to give ideas to it. By accident, I forgot a whole category here of redistributing the bikes. So doing things in the supply side, not just in the demand side of the equation, as these two buckets, perceived value and friction, do. They're on the demand side. On the supply side, you can redistribute the bikes. I noticed it by accident, but I take it as an opportunity to show you what to do when you notice it and how to recover in a real interview. Just do what I did. I noticed it, I told you that I noticed it, and then at the end I came back to it and I mentioned a couple ideas. Okay, so you can do the same to your interviewer, it's fine. They forget stuff too when they're working in their projects. The only thing is, when they notice they forgot, or when someone noticed they forgot, they tell the person, oh, sorry, I forgot it, and they come back to it and just develop it and bring ideas to it and develop some insight. Okay, and The other things that I was going to talk about, which were more planned, are how did I structure this? So let's go through this structure. One way to structure brainstormings, or if you're not really good at structuring, you should use the 5 ways to be messy. So for each layer, use one of the ways to be messy. Okay? So for example, here, how to increase perceived value and hassle friction. This is a simple conceptual framework that I've learned in the past and that I'm using here. Now, I don't talk about this one in the 5 ways to be messy, but it's one that I've learned. If you're not using a product or service, one way to think about it is it offering enough value? Yes or no? If not, then that's why I'm not using it. And if it is offering enough value, then it's probably due to friction. So this is a small conceptual framework. You can use one of the other ways to be messy to do this. In this layer, actual value and perception, I use the technique that I actually don't mention in the article or the videos on the 5 ways to be messy, but it's basically a semantic breakdown. So perceived value is perception plus actual value. And you can use this to structure a lot of cases, and it's actually a really flexible technique. So those of you who've gone to business school or who know a lot of business concepts, you've probably heard about a sustainable competitive advantage. And if your interviewer asks you, well, what could be sustainable competitive advantages for this company? I've never heard this question before, but they could. You could break it down into what could be competitive advantages and which of these could be sustainable. So another semantic breakdown, just to give an example. And then the hassle friction, I broke down using a process type of structure. So sign up friction. After you sign up, you walk to the stations. And then after you walk, you have to pick up the bike and you use some interfaces to that. So it's out of order here, but it is a process type of structure. So this is how you can use the 5 ways to be messy, or some structuring techniques that even go beyond the 5 ways to be messy, to structure a brainstorming question in a messy way. And of course, I over-relied in a conceptual framework that I knew of value and friction, and I forgot to look at the supply side of the equation, which is the bike redistributing part. So I could have thought of demand and supply first and then use this framework. So I just looked at the demand, and that's where the mistake came from. I over-relied on the conceptual framework that I learned, so don't do the same mistake. I didn't practice what I preach in this case, and I hope you don't do the same mistake in your interviews as well. Okay, so I hope this was good. I hope this was a fun and useful learning experience for you, and I'll see you in the next video.